What I thought I would do today is explain in detail why I've made some of the changes to the guns that I have, especially with regard to the grips. So this, for example, is the 75B frame that I usually use as a cadet host. It's got the 9mm slide on it with the CGW bushing, and it's a nail driver, by the way. But this gun has the factory rubber grips, but with some Sugru rubber material added and some grip tape added. And then on the, I'm right-handed, so on the right side grip there is some fill-in Sugru in the area that's normally kind of indented right here. And part of the reason for that is that the reach to the trigger, you can adjust the reach to the trigger two ways. You can change the distance from the back here to the trigger, and you can also change the width of the grip. If this part of the grip is wider, it'll move your knuckle out further and it'll change the way your finger sits on the trigger. So there's two things I've tried to do in modifying these guns. One is to get the reach to the trigger such that I never have to think about where I'm putting my finger on the trigger. I don't have to consciously move it out or move it in. It's essentially, it goes in as far as the thickness of the grip and the reach will allow the finger to be inserted into the trigger. What that does is it makes it very easy to be consistent with how you position your finger on the trigger. The problem is that when you're shooting bullseye, at least, you've got a 22 gun, you've got a centerfire gun, you've got a 45, and you can shoot the 45 in the centerfire, which is what I do, or I can shoot the 9mm. So, of course, the reach and everything is perfect with the 9mm slide on this gun compared to the 22 slide because it didn't change. But when I shoot the 97 or the P09 or the P07, everything's different. So this gun, what I've done is I've tried to get contact area everywhere on the gun that I needed it. Or that I could get it, I should say. And then I have made it so that the reach to the trigger when you pick up the sear is perfect for me. It's not perfect for everybody. But these grips, the grip and the shape of this gun is actually pretty much perfect for me with this setup the way it is shown here. And the idea really is to get the rest of the guns similar to this one, because this is the one I've shot the most. I'm coming up on 50,000 rounds through this frame. So that's a lot of time on the range with this setup. Now, let me show you when the grip is right, you take up the sear, and then you start moving the trigger slowly, 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 and then the gun goes off. And it's that pressure and then slow, more pressure without moving the gun is what allows you to shoot the gun accurately. The trick is you've got two tricks. You've got to get the sights in the right spot every time, and you've got to be able to move the trigger without moving the gun. So everything I do is to accomplish those two tasks. Consistent placement of the sights on the target, and then being able to move the trigger without moving the gun, without changing anything on the grip as you move the trigger. Now, the 97 is a bigger gun. The length fore and aft here is longer, and what CZ tried to do to compensate is the gun's already pretty thick, so they put pretty thin grips on the gun. The aluminum grips are too thin for me. I went to the rubber grips on this gun and then added just enough Sugru here to fill in that slot that they have at the top for people with shorter fingers than mine. I put in enough Sugru so that when I grip the gun, my knuckle is just far enough off the gun so that my trigger finger placement is essentially the same as it is on the 75. Now, grip tape, all that you don't need on a 22. You gotta have grip tape on a 45 or a 9mm, or the gun will move. What you have to do with this gun is you have to get it where the butt of the grip fits in the palm of your hand, just like that. Then you wrap your fingers around it, then your trigger finger placement is perfect. Or you have to adjust things on the gun to get it perfect. So with this gun, if you don't get that gun in the crease here in your palm, it's going to go there after a couple of shots. That's all I can tell you. You can't shoot the gun with it off to the side like that. Notice the trigger finger insertion's too great. You can't shoot the gun like that because you can't reach the trigger. It has to be right like that. Then the gun won't move from shot to shot, and if it doesn't move from shot to shot, then your trigger finger placement doesn't change, and you can be more consistent releasing the trigger, releasing the sear and the hammer each shot. The other thing I've done on this one is I do a lot of work to get the contact area right on it. You'll see I've got Sugru in here. I felt like when I gripped the gun that it was hollow in that area. Now part of that is because the grip's still fairly flat, but I've tried thicker grips. Some of the Dave B's really good grips are a little bit too thick for me. And so I took them off after 2 or 3 months to go back to the rubber and essentially be able to make the grips the way I need them for me, and then I may trim the Dave B grips to match what I wind up with here on the as far as the shape goes. But this gun, you can see those grips are fairly flat even now, and what I had to do was fill in the area on the front, on the right side, and fill in this area on the left side so that when my fingers are wrapped around it, I've got good contact. My fingertips, which are the most sensitive parts of your finger, I felt like there was a hole there in the grip. And when I filled it in with Sugru, it improved my ability to hold the gun consistently from shot to shot as the gun tried to move around in your hand on recoil. So this gun now fits me very well, and it's such a soft shooter and so heavy and nice that it really has become my favorite centerfire bullseye gun because it fits me right now. I've got the trigger right now. I've got my contact area right now. I can be consistent with it. The only thing that's a little different is this trigger is a little crisper than the one in the 75B. And that's the last thing I may have to adjust. But if I had to leave it the way it is right now, it'd be fine. I've won a lot of matches with this gun the way it is right now. So, those are the two current bullseye guns, and those are really good. But when I first started shooting bullseye, I shot bullseye with a P09. And why P09? I didn't know any better, to be honest, was one reason. The other reason is the darn gun is mechanically so accurate that I just couldn't believe how accurate this gun was. It's still the kind of the standard for accuracy from a rest of all the guns I have. So the P09 though is light, and it's the lightweight that hurts you in the wind in West Texas in a bullseye match. You really need a heavier gun than this to shoot it single hand at 50 yards without it moving around very much. And it has nothing to do with the mechanical aspects of the gun. It has everything to do with just the weight. But if it wasn't for just that one reason, plus the holes are bigger with a 45. If I had to shoot bullseye the next year, center fire with this gun, I'd be happy. But this gun is a service gun. And what they tried to do was make the grip flat, the grip shape. Essentially, they built up polymer around the magazine and the spring housing is what they did. So the grip is no bigger than it has to be to allow for the magazine and the hammer spring. And what that means is that the grip is very flat, which is great for a carry gun or a service gun, but not so much so for a bullseye gun. So what I do, I built up the flat area of the grip with JB-Weld. It's really pretty. And I ovalized the grip. So you can see that the shape of the grip now is much more oval, especially on the right side. And the reason is I needed to get full contact with the grip against my fingers and my knuckles on the right side of the hand. And I also had to increase the length of the trigger reach because this trigger comes back so far, and this gun has a short reset kit in it that I probably don't need. But the trigger comes back almost against the frame before it hits the sear. And it was hard for me to get a consistent trigger position on this gun until I fattened up the grips. It's still not quite the same as a 75B, but it's pretty good. Since I don't use it in bullseye anymore, I'm not too worried about it. But to get the length, I had to move my knuckle out on the right side. I had to add some Sugru to the back. I had to use the large grip insert, and generally had to fatten the grip everywhere I had contact with it. Now, there's a lot of wasted Sugru on the left side, but that's so that I can shoot it with the left hand if I have to. So, and then the other thing I had to do was add some JB-Weld to the front side of the trigger. Essentially move the trigger, make the trigger thicker so that I had to reach further for it. And that's really key to this gun for me. Without that, this thing is, I wind up inserting my finger too far is what happens. With this, I know it looks horrible, but this really works. And this gun, I can shoot it about as well as anything I've got. Whether well, I can still shoot bullseye with it if I have to, but I would really rather shoot the 97. So, fatten up the grip oval so I get good contact area everywhere on my hand, increase the distance to the trigger to get my trigger finger placement right. And then the only other thing on this gun I could do and should do is put some grip tape on it. I never did. The front of the grip is pretty good. The back's not bad, but it's a little slick. And the other thing I would do is probably add a little more JB-Weld to the front of this trigger and build it up. But that's it for that one. That's a super firearm. Last is the P07. I got the P07 as a training gun, a demo gun, carry gun, and physically it fit about the same as a P09. I love the short barrel. I love the way this gun feels. I was pleasantly surprised at how accurate it was, but I took everything I learned on the other three guns and applied it to this one pretty much first week I got it. I fattened up the grip. I used Sugru instead of JB-Weld. The Sugru shape's a lot nicer and you can trim it with an X-Acto knife. I added grip tape, partially to fill in some of the flat spots, but also to make sure I had a good grip on the thing. And so you can see the right side is fairly ovalized. The left side is filled in where it needs to be, and also filled in where I can shoot it left-handed if I have to. So it's somewhat ovalized. And this one has a lot more fill on the trigger. And I've cut this one back some since I shot the bullseye match with it, so that other people could shoot it that don't have as long fingers as I do. But that is that's a good trigger position for me. And this gun shoots every bit as well as the P09. It's got a shorter sight radius, but I've shot it in a bullseye match with a red dot mounted on it temporarily, and won the bullseye match with it. But I did that just to irritate my 1911 buddies. So this gun fits me perfectly. If I gave it to a lady that had smaller hands, I would have to remove all this stuff. But long-fingered guy like me, this is perfect. Ugly, but perfect. Long, skinny, old hands with a very well-educated trigger finger. So anyway, that's it. I just wanted to show you a little bit about why I've done some of the things I've done. It's not just to irritate the purists, although that's a benefit. It's mainly to make these guns that weren't made for bullseye shooting specifically, to be dimensionally where they need to be for me to shoot them well in these local bullseye matches. That's all I wanted to show you. Thanks.